and I'm going to let people in. Hello to everyone joining. We're going to wait just a minute and I think we might have a few additional people who are going to be coming in, but if you are looking for the MBA and Beyond coffee chat, you are in the right Zoom room. So get comfortable, sit back, get your coffee, your snacks, whatever you need. And like I said, we're going to wait just a few more seconds for anybody else to join in. I hear the little doorbell sound going off in my AirPods, so people are joining. You're also welcome to turn on your camera if you'd like. This is not, a formal presentation. We definitely want this to be a conversation. We think everyone's going to benefit from the insights we talk about here today. So just letting you know, if you want to turn on your camera, you're more than welcome to. And as the conversation goes on, you'll be able to unmute yourselves or put questions in the chat box. All of that is fine. All right, so I think whoever is here is here. Okay, so let's get started. I'm Elena with MBA and Beyond. So I'm one of the consulting managers and a senior profile expert, and I'm joined by two other profile experts who have also gotten admits into some awesome schools, and they're going to share their insights today about the process, and answer your questions, give you some insights or tips, advice as best we can. And for anyone who has already done a profile evaluation with us, we're going to send you something in a couple days. So keep an eye out on your email. I'll talk about that more later. Okay, but let's do introductions. So I want to hear introductions from our two primary speakers right now. So Anishka, why don't you start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Anushka. I'm currently working at BCG as an analyst. I have about 3.5 years of experience, and I'm a part of their technology advantage practice area. I primarily work on blockchain, AI, and Web3 topics. I applied for Cambridge Judge Business School in September 2022, and I got an admit. So I'll be heading to Judge this September. And if you guys have any questions about European schools and just the whole application process in general, I would be happy to answer.
Awesome. Thank you, Anishka. Vishali?
Yeah, hi, everyone. How are you doing? Hope you're having a fantastic evening. So I'm Vishali, and I primarily belong to the fashion industry in India. I've worked with and been on the founding team of 3 different fashion startups. And I have close to a decade of experience now. And last September or October, I applied to ESSEC Business School for strategy and digital leadership major, and I got accepted at that. So I'll be starting my MBA this year, somewhere around September. So pretty excited about it and hoping that we can make this a very interactive and fun session today.
Yes, and I love that it's BCG consulting and then fashion startups. And it's just like, again, very different, industries, different schools. And so it's going to be, I think, awesome to hear just kind of insights of both y'all's experiences. And then a little bit on my background is, so I actually help manage the consultants for MBA and Beyond, but my background is in undergraduate admissions and then also other types of master's programs specializing in the top tier US schools. So US admissions is more my forte, but I am becoming more familiar with European. However, I think we create a good balance of they're going to be, have a lot of expertise and insight on the European, kind of application process, and I'll be able to offer insight also from the US perspective for top tier US admissions. But for anyone that has questions, again, we want this to be interactive. We don't have like a formal presentation because we want it to be about you, the people joining us. We want you to ask your questions. So go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat box, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and just ask the question. But if you have something in particular about, the application process or about particular schools or even their industries, you are welcome to ask that. But Anushka, Vishali, you both worked with MBA and Beyond, correct? Like through your applications?
Yes.
What do you feel like was the most helpful part of the process, or maybe the part where you're like, yeah, I definitely could not have done this on my own type of thing?
Yeah,
Maybe
I think definitely. Oh, Anushka, go ahead.
all right. I think for me, it was the whole building the branding phase and coming up with a global business problem, the whole narrative, and making sure that I stand out compared to most Indian applicants or just applicants worldwide, and making sure that my impact is being conveyed. Although I had like very few years of experience and relatively low leadership experience, I was told that it's not just about managing people, it's also about making sure, having the skills and what it takes to be a good leader. So that I was able to convey that through my story. So that really helped.
Okay, awesome. So branding. Vishali, what about you?
I think for me, it has been the introspection process, because like as mentioned, I do not belong to that quantitative industry. Like I've been far away from typical studies and everything for quite a while. So for me to get back into that GMAT and typical application mindset, it was really difficult in the start, especially like managing work as a senior position and then also studying for GMAT and everything. So usually what I feel that applicants face one of the two problems: either if they're coming from an overrepresented pool of candidates, then making sure that their story stands out, or at the same time, either they are coming from a really distinct background where they don't know how to play their cards right. And for me, it was the later story, because I don't really in my day-to-day lifestyle really interact with a lot of people who are into the same mindset of getting into a top MBA business school and then looking forward to change their career that way. So for me, the whole introspection process to kind of really dig deep into my story and get my strengths out and how to really convey my strengths in the best possible way. That was the best part of the journey that I had with MBA and Beyond.
Thank you both for sharing that. And just because you both kind of mentioned, again, that introspection, the content gathering, the branding, for anyone who, well, I assume everyone who's kind of with us right now has not necessarily gone through that process or may not know exactly what that looks like. And so I'm just going to share my screen here real quick. So this is just a quick overview on content gathering and branding. And so when you work with MBA and Beyond, this probably actually looks maybe a little different than it did Anushka and Vishali when you were with us. We upgraded the portal a little bit. But, when you start working with us, you have something called content gathering and then eventually branding. So step one, we're not just saying, oh, what schools do you want to apply to? So, step one, the onboarding, we're asking you for 3 referrals or references for people who know you. So you're giving that unbiased perspective, because admissions people, they are very conscious of looking for that biased perspective and saying like, are you self-aware enough to recognize it? So when you have feedback from other people talking about like your strengths and weaknesses, that helps. And then when we do, content gathering, we're asking you, all these different topics, like over here on the left, like goals, strengths, weaknesses, international experience, extracurriculars, why MBA. It ends up being like, tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I feel like it's almost like you're writing like a thesis, like for a master's or a PhD, like it's a PhD in yourself. But it ends up being a lot of content. And so when you get all that content, it can seem a little overwhelming, like, okay, I have all of this to work with. I've been introspective, I've thought through all these stories, but now what? That's too much content. I can't, you can't do something effective with that. And that's where branding comes in. And Anushka, this is more of what you were talking about, of kind of like summarizing that branding into strengths and motivators, like clear short-term goals, clear long-term goals, and then clearly understanding your opportunities for growth. And from there, that's where you start making those alignments with the schools of saying, here's how my brand aligns with your brand. But while we are all experts in ourselves, it's really hard to communicate that effectively right? Like you want to kind of throw everything at them, or you have nothing to say. It's usually one of the extremes. And so when you have like a consultant who knows the questions to ask, it's like, now I can share it in a much more like organized way. Sorry, a few people are asking questions like on DM. So let me read through that real quick. Okay, so someone asked, please share like a time schedule one should start the journey, like from taking the GMAT to building the resume. Okay, so great question, talking about timeline. All right, let's go opposite. So Vishali, what was your timeline like? How long did it take you to do the process? And do you wish you had more time? Do you feel like you could have done it in a short amount of time? What was that like for you?
To be honest, I felt like I could have used a little bit more time because like I started my application journey well in January, and I applied in the round one of each of the programs that I applied to. And even though it sounds like it's like 7-8 months of time, but like with the amount of work that we do on a daily basis with work responsibilities and daily life, everything, it kind of becomes tedious to do everything at the same time. But I also believe that introspection is something that you cannot just do in a very short amount of time. There's like years and years of experience that you have gotten through, years and years of different stories that you might overlook. And in my case, that was the only thing that happened, that I forgot so many things that I did in my own journey that I didn't think were, important enough to, really mention on my applications. But the more amount of time I spent on the introspection process, then it kind of became easier to kind of give enough time to each of my applications. And on an average, it took me like 20 to 25 days per application. So if I was applying to like 4 schools, like 4 months on an average, it took just for the applications, and the rest 4 were gone into the introspection process. So yeah, I think that was like, I was good sorted amount in that amount of time, but the more time, the better. I think that's how I would put it.
Were you studying? Sorry, maybe you mentioned this. Were you studying for your GRE or GMAT during that time?
Absolutely, I was studying.
Okay.
Yes. I was.
You were doing it simultaneously.
Well. Yes.
Okay, Anishka, how about you?
Mine was a very similar story. I think I worked with MBA and Beyond for 7 months, and I gave my final GMAT attempt, I think, end of June. I was doing it side by side, and I felt like, working on applications is like a creative break from your monotonous work in GMAT, because it really pushes you and you have a reason. It motivates you, right? Like, if not, I guess GMAT becomes pretty boring. You don't really know what you're working towards. It's a lot of hard work and not much of motivation. So yeah, I think I spend a lot of time, and especially for European schools, that's super important, because on an average, we'll be writing about 8 to 11 essays, I guess. So even if you do 2 a week, you would need 1.5 months for school. So that was my take on it.
Okay. So both of you started early, but it sounds like, even when you're starting that early, it can, again, it creeps up on you. But when you start that early, you're able to also, I think, make pivots. And that's something I see, honestly, having worked, or, I oversee a lot of the US clients. And so I feel like a lot of the people in the US actually end up starting like a lot, like they don't give themselves as much time. And I think that's also a little bit of a cultural thing of, they feel more confident maybe in admissions, but what I end up seeing is that a lot of them end up feeling rushed, or they're not able to make the changes necessary, like in their brand. So again, I'm just gonna share my screen real quick. So this is, I did like a video, branding video, which we can share later, but on like case studies for, different people, clients we've actually worked with that started at certain periods of time, and like how branding and starting early kind of influenced them. And this was an example, someone last year who applied round 1, started with us like in March, and she ended up doing content gathering, and she was very unsure that her extracurriculars or her current role, which was in finance, that it didn't really like her long-term goal of going to like agricultural sustainability and everything, which sounds like a very odd pivot. But when she did content gathering, she realized, oh, these stories actually work well together. And then it made her feel more confident. So she actually like switched careers and did a financial role in an agricultural startup to show like initiative towards her goals. And this was while she was studying for the GMAT, and then the GMAT, she took it. Anyway, she had time though to switch roles, gain experiences within that role before even applying. And I think that's the bonus of when you start early, is you're able to like be very much more aware of like, oh, are my extracurriculars representative of me, or anything along those lines. And it doesn't look like to admissions like, oh, this is something you just started a month ago. And it's very obvious. Someone asked a question also about the TOEFL, or, is it mandatory after having 5 years work experience? Can you get a waiver? I'm not sure how the waiver works, but I do know that for some schools it is mandatory no matter the work experience. If the school you went to was not the primary language of instruction, was not English, then like Harvard, for example, if the primary school of instruction was not in English, you have to take the TOEFL. It doesn't matter how many years work experience. I do know some schools are like accepting like at-home things and things like that, but like tests you can take, but I believe it is still mandatory for many schools. Any GMAT prep resource you refer to or recommend? So did either of y'all use a GMAT or GRE prep course? Because that's not something MBA and Beyond offers. So if Anishka or Vishali, if you guys used anything, feel free to.
Yeah, for me, like I was really okay with my quant side. Like I just needed a refreshment of that. But to really understand how the verbal works on GMAT, it was a whole new shift in mindset. So for me, eGMAT really worked in that case. But at the end of the day, it's all about understanding the concepts. But to practice, I think there was no better place than GMAT Club to just know the questions that are out there, the kind of questions, and then, figure out where you're going wrong and what is the expected answer. So it was a good discussion forum as well, and a good amount of question banks to practice on.
Thank you. Go ahead, Anishka, if you have.
I used a platform called GMAT Wiz. I think it was pretty good for me. Yeah, I mean, I started off with a 720. Initially, I did self-prep. I had a good score, but I wanted to bump it up to that 750 plus. So I guess, I mean, again, it varies from person to person, but GMAT Wiz worked out for me.
And before I forget, I want to mention, sorry, this is not about GMAT prep, but for anyone here watching that is interested in doing a profile evaluation call or has already done one, please be prepared for us to send you. We know that a lot of people are going to be applying potentially for round 3, 4 for January start terms. We will be sending y'all a little special or something we think will be really beneficial to you in your email in like 2 to 3 days. So keep an eye out for that. Also, there are a few slots available for Anishka and Vishali. If you want one of them to do an in-depth profile evaluation for you, you're welcome to fill out one of our forms for a free profile evaluation. Again, slots time, it's limited, but there's a link in the chat box if you guys would like to do that. Because again, sometimes it's one of the best ways to like prepare or kind of get in the mindset for applying for an MBA is to talk to someone who just did it or who has done it recently, because they know what's going to be asked. They know what the industries are like right now. They know what, admissions people are looking for right now, because it's always changing. So we just, saw a bunch of tech layoffs happening. So I know that some admissions people, especially for the interview people, so some of the interviewers have been asking applicants who are interested, for example, of going into anything regarding tech, going, well, what's your plan if it doesn't work out? You know, like just questions that maybe someone who applied last year would not have encountered. They're questions that are being asked now. So someone who just went through the process again is going to be a good person to give you some insight on your profile. Okay, someone just asked, what is the preferred years of work experience for European MBA programs? So over to you, Anishka or Vishali.
I think anything 3+ is good, but the average is around 28 to 32. That's the average class age, but I think European schools do prefer people with slightly higher number of experience. So, but still, like if you have a good reason to do an MBA right now with limited number of experience, you're still good. As long as your why MBA is good enough and it's supported by good evidence, you're good to go.
Vishali, does that sound about like what you would say, or anything you want to add to that?
No. I think, yeah, Anishka covered it really well. I think, yeah, the average years of experience is somewhere around like 3+, but the more the merrier. I mean, for European schools, it's something like that. And definitely, like, if the average age also falls around 28 to 32. So I think that will amount to the same years of experience.
And I think for just my input on the US side of things is we're definitely a little ageist over here in the US. Don't tell them I said that. But the average age or average years of work experience you'll see over here tends to be more 3 to 5 years. So it's much more common for people in Europe to have more years work experience. And that's often because people go and get their like MIMs or like masters in finance or in management or something. They go to university prior to going to work, and then they go get their MBAs. So again, you'll usually see a slightly older candidate or a few more years of experience. Whereas in the US, it's more common to see people who have just gotten their bachelor's, gone to work, or maybe gotten their master's, but gone to work. And then within a couple of years, they're going to get their MBA. So you should see a slightly lower average over here. Okay, and then I think Anishka may have lost service. It's okay, but
for some reason there's an issue with my camera, I guess.
no problem.
But,
you're there with us in spirit though, so just kidding. We can hear you, so that's good. Okay, someone asked, if you don't have big names in your resume, will it hinder your chances to M7s or any top B schools? And then how do gap year and low GPA play a role regarding the same? So let's start with big names. Anishka, you don't really count because you have a big name. Although I know you could give insight onto people who don't, but like Vishali, you know, you're not coming from McKinsey or something or Meta.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's not about the names, it's about the impact. So wherever you are working, wherever you have come from, it really doesn't matter as long as you have had enough impact in your role and you've managed to, on your resume as well as off your resume, you have done a lot of work, whether it's for volunteer work or, even at your work, typical work day. So it doesn't really matter if you're coming from working in the top the unicorns or whatever. It really doesn't matter over there. And to answer the second part of your question is whether or not low GPA plays a role in that. So the thing is, it's not just about one thing. It's every little part of your application that plays an impact. Every bit of your application will have some or the other value attached to it. So not necessarily any one thing will not make or break your chances, but it will definitely play a role and count in. And it also matters how you're able to express why you were able, why did you have a low GPA? Were there some other reasons behind it, and how you're going to keep up with the curriculum of the MBA school going forward. So you just have to convince them of that.
Absolutely. Thank you. And really quick, so Kui, I'm glad you were able to join us. If I can ask you to introduce yourself real quick. So everybody watching, this is another one of our profile experts. So Kui, if you just can tell us your name, kind of the industry you were coming from, your MBA, and yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I am late. There was some connection issue in the Dharma's Wi-Fi. My name is Kui. I'm one of the profile experts with MBA and Beyond. I've been working here for a little bit more than 1 year, mostly focusing on the candidates going to North America and European schools. Before MBA, I was in biotech and pharma, mostly in Boston. I was doing R&D, business development. And then after I got into tech, I started working for a VC firm. And then this summer, I'm going to work full-time for a consulting firm, a boutique firm that's much smaller than BCG, McKinsey, way smaller. We probably only have more than 100 people focusing on a niche market. I will also keep working part-time for a VC firm based in Boston, doing financial modeling and maybe later due diligence. So feel free to ask any questions about your application or my journey. But yeah, this is a little bit about myself. Oh, by the way, I'm in talk right now. I think I didn't mention that. I'm sorry.
It's okay. You blame them for the Wi-Fi issues. No, I'm just kidding. But we know. So I
yeah,
like this because me and Kui, US.
Dharma's Wi-Fi is not good. Just kidding. We are decent at Wi-Fi. Don't worry.
All right, so we have kind of, European versus US over here. So now it's even. Just kidding. But okay, so Vaishali, though, thank you for answering that. That was a really in-depth answer to that question about big names being on your resume and how it impacts your chances. I just want to affirm that, yes, it is about impact. Now, people with big names on their resumes, it's not really that they have the big name, it's that it's sometimes slightly easier for them to communicate a big impact or communicate what that impact was because the company is so big that it can be really apparent, like, oh, okay, this is how it impacts, this is how it affects like the larger picture, et cetera, et cetera. That's going to be a little easier to do with somewhere like Google or Meta or Amazon or whatever. And ultimately, yes, schools like Harvard who love their case studies, they like that. They like knowing how an action can impact a larger, what that looks like on a larger scale or what that could look like within the industry. So it's not necessarily that it's the name. It's just that those people that work there, sometimes it's a little easier for them to come up with the impact. But that doesn't mean that somebody who's working in a small, like Kui, working in a smaller consulting firm, or who's working like for a family-owned business or a fashion, retailer or something, you might have to work a little harder to really understand, to really communicate what the impact was and how it therefore impacted the company and what that could look like for the industry as a whole. So yeah, you have to do a little bit more introspection with it, but ultimately it does come down to what was the impact, because it doesn't matter if you worked at Meta or McKinsey or wherever. If you can't talk about it in a case study or in an essay, then you're not bringing added value to the program. And that's what the MBA wants to know is, do you understand how these things work? And would you be able to add value to those conversations? As far as gap year and low GPA, it's very rare that you have a candidate that just has the perfect resume, right? Especially us, for the profile experts, for the consultants, people who are going to work with a consultant or profile experts or somebody usually don't have a perfect resume. They're usually dealing with like a low GMAT or low GPA, or, they got laid off or they had a gap year or anything like that. And yet they still get into programs, they still get into top tier schools. And that's because there are ways to strategize and present what MBA people want to know. What are you doing with that time? What are you doing with that opportunity? Or what have you learned from the experience? Somebody asked the ideal GRE range for Oxford and Cambridge. So Anishka, you're the Cambridge girl. What do you think is the ideal GRE range?
Okay, according to their website, it's 320, a well-balanced 160 in verbal and 160 in quant. That's according to their, website. But of course, because that's the average, it can be slightly lower or higher. I think most of Indian students have a higher quant but lack in verbal. But all they're looking for is a decent, well-balanced score. That's it.
Someone said, if I'm aiming to apply for August or the September 2024 intake, when should I ideally start working on my profile? And how important is volunteering work on the resume? I think we talked about this a little bit, but I would love to hear your take on this of, so if someone's wanting to apply for round 1 in September to therefore start next year, when do you think is the best time to start working on their profile?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, I'd love to hear your insight on that.
Actually, I wanted to add something. This is unsolicited, but I want to add something about the big names on your resume, because I have thought about that a lot. So
Absolutely.
I think every one of us, we want to think like, actually, it's not the question of the MBA application, it's the question of your life, right? So when you are dating, do you want to date a McKinsey consultant, or you want to date someone that didn't work at McKinsey before? Probably if you have a big names, your lowest threshold, your minimum level is a little bit higher, but that's it. At least what I am seeing in the US is like the reason why we are having so many coffee chats, so many conversations, a lot of visiting is because people want to know you. They will not give you the offer because, wow, that guy worked for McKinsey. Wow, cool, fancy. No, it's definitely not the case. However, for us, when we are applying, if you don't have this big name, we have to try harder for us to communicate our values. What do we learn throughout this process? I actually just talked with a candidate who were laid off in the tech, and he worked for several tech startups. I actually think he has a very interesting experience. So you most likely will learn more by working for a small company than working for a large company. Or you would say you are learning very different skill sets by working for different employers. If you work for Meta, yeah, you know how to run a billion business. You probably know how the billion business is working, but in a startup, you know how to do the startup pitch or something like that. It's a very different skill sets. So yeah, this is something that I wanted to add. And another question is that when we should start working for the application. The answer might be disappoint you. We should definitely start as early as possible because we don't want to view the application as just writing an essay, writing a resume, get the LOR done. Yes, write a 300 words letter is super easy. I can write 300 letter article or essay in one day, but does it mean you only spend one day to work on that? No, because thinking about what to write takes a lot more time than just writing it. And this is the only, I'm also talking about application, but there are a lot more other than application. First, networking, right? At least in the US, networking is actually should start even before you're applying to the schools. How do you know you like the schools? You have to talk to the people. You talk to the alumni, you talk to current students, you talk to admission officers. It takes a very long time for you to talk to enough people for you to get to know a school, and also takes a long time for you to actually know the culture of the school. I also know it's kind of very abstract when we say the culture of the school or something, it's very abstract. Before I apply, they're all the same, right? They're all MBA school. But when I get into the school, when I start talking to people, when I'm looking for jobs, I do see there's a lot of cultural difference between the school. The people here have different expectations. They have kind of stereotypes of the people who went to different schools. You have to know that because first, you have to show it in your application. Second, when you are doing the interviews, you are actually talking to these people. Then we should definitely start as soon as possible. Yes, this is my answer.
Thank you, Kui. I think I can just turn off my camera and microphone and just let you three run this because I could just sit here and listen to you guys all day. So this is great insight, I think, and even I'm still like learning things. And they did ask, how important is it to have volunteering work on the resume? I think this just goes back to kind of what Vishal, Anushka, and Kui have all said at this point of whatever you think you can have an impact on, do that. Because if you're just volunteering to check a box, it's the same thing as working at a big name company just to work at a big name company. Like ultimately, they're going to ask you why or what did you do? Why did you do it? And if you can't really answer that, then what was the point of it? It's everything you do, whether that's your role or your extracurriculars, it doesn't necessarily all have to be pointed exactly at your professional goal, your professional goals per se, but it should be representative of something you are truly interested in. Because ultimately, when you're in somewhere like Cambridge or Essex or Tuck, they're going to want to know, what kind of student are you going to be here on our campus? Are you going to be someone who goes to class and is quiet and then goes home, and that's it? Or are you going to be someone who gets involved, who pursues their interests, who participates, who adds meaning to the conversation? And they are looking at your resume and your extracurriculars to see evidence of this, of what kind of person are you going to be in their cohort? What kind of person are you going to be in a future business? So that is more of what they're looking for on the resume. Someone asked, my background is in nursing. I'm hoping to pivot. How do you highlight your work experience? Well, first of all, nursing, thank you. Because I know that's a really hard job. But I would say for nursing or for any job, don't focus on necessarily what the day-to-day is. Again, focus on impact, focus on where you have to take the lead in things. And that doesn't necessarily mean where you are leading a group, but where you have to take the initiative in something, where you have to problem solve. Look at the outcomes that you impact. And again, you can't cure a patient on your own. That's not the outcomes that you would be talking about, but you would be talking about the types of responsibilities and initiatives you have to take during, again, really busy times at a hospital, or new procedures that are being implemented, or anything along those lines. But look for impact, not necessarily just for your schedule and what you do on a day-to-day. And by the way, for anyone who wants more insight, all three of these amazing speakers, you can, and also me if you want to, but really these guys, the profile experts, they have a few slots each available for an in-depth profile evaluation. And I think there is the link in the chat box. So if you want to enroll with them, I would do that now. And if you're able to enroll and do a profile evaluation with us within the next few days, then you'll be getting a special offer, I think, in 2 to 3 days in your email. All right, someone asked, can we make up in other areas of our application for a lack of or a lower GMAT or GRE score? If yes, how? Yes. So anybody, please, Vishali, Anishka, feel free to jump in there.
I think I'm the expert in the low GMAT section.
Okay.
Because I scored a 640 with like quant 48 and 31 bubbles. So yeah, for me, I did not want to go for a reattempt. Like I did not have the energy in me, and frankly, like my time schedule was not allowing me to, retake the whole process again and, dive deeper. So I made sure to understand that GMAT holds a certain percentage of the weightage of your application process, and which is close to about 15%, but rest 85%, which is the whole profile, your narrative and everything. So I made sure that I focused my attention towards building a very, very cohesive story and making sure that it made up for the lack of, a very, very high GMAT score whatsoever. So yeah, that's how I suggest that people should tackle it. And to be able to do that, to be able to understand what that unique narrative and the storyline would be, it's very important for the whole introspection process to be really in depth, and making sure that your story is very cohesive and it's all collinear, and the passion behind your whole story is really shining through.
Yeah, and we've all, I think, seen, whether it's fellow students or colleagues or clients or whoever, we've seen those people with like the 760 GMATs who still get dinged. And it's, a high GMAT score doesn't really do much for you if you can't communicate your brand effectively. Klee mentioned dating, and like jokingly, that is actually an analogy I use, and I'm almost wondering if he's like listening in on some of my calls, because like I use that analogy all the time of like how applying for an MBA can be a lot like the dating experience. But ultimately, if you are not, it's okay if you're lacking in an area, but what people are usually really looking for is like consistency and a consistent message, because they don't want to get catfished, right? It's going to be very disconcerting if you're presenting part of your brand as like, say, collaborative in your essays, and then your letters of recommendation are all about how you're such an independent worker who takes initiatives on their own. And, you know, those two things, they're both good things and they both can be you. But together in an application, it's a yellow flag, right? That'd be like if on a dating app you said, oh, I'm really funny. And then on the date, all you do is talk about politics and philosophy and you like never smile. Like it's okay to be both those things, but you want to have a consistent brand. And that can make a person feel a lot more confident in you than just having a high GMAT score. That's like saying, oh, I just make a lot of money, but then you have a bad personality. Like, you know, you gotta, there are certain things that admissions is going to look for. Someone said, did non-certification courses account for in your resume? Pretty much anything in your resume, they're going to look at it and they're going to ask why, right? Whatever it is. So if it makes sense for you as to why you did it, like, oh, I did this course because I needed to brush up on my quant skills or my accounting or my whatever it happens to be, my analytics, great. Like if it makes sense to you of why you did it, then it's part of your resume. Then it's there. But if you're just doing something again to check a box and you don't really know why you're doing it, that probably should not be something you're pursuing. Whatever you pursue, just make sure you're able to communicate why. What measures can we take to distinguish our profile being part of an overrepresented pool? So I think we've covered a lot of different things about this. But in some way, like again, all our profile experts in their own way are part of an overrepresented demographic. So how about each of y'all just share like what was something in your application that you feel kind of set you apart in some way, one way or another? So whoever wants to go first. Anishka, I'm just making you talk. Go.
I think for me, what really worked at is how I showcased my passion for what I'm doing. And honestly, people think that it's easy to be from a big brand, but trust me, it's not, because you're competing with other people from the same brand. And there's a lot of competition. There are a lot of people from BCG, McKinsey, and Bain with a lot more experience, and I was competing with them. So, and all of them have a good GMAT score, and more or less all of us have that brand, right? So how do you showcase yourself to be unique? And that was, of course, difficult, but I did that through, I think, the whole narrative behind how I started off with blockchain. I spoke about the Cambridge Analytica scandal and Brexit, how it impacted Brexit and how it impacted the Donald Trump campaign, and spoke about data privacy, data transparency, how it's something really close to my heart. And that's why I am in blockchain right now. And post MBA, I want to continue in a consulting firm and have an impact where people can interact with internet without the fear of data loss or data privacy. And to support my story, I have also worked on a case where we launched the world's first crypto web browser. So the whole thing, the whole narrative, of course, it would have been impossible without working with a consultant. I think Shantanu really helped me put things in perspective and told me that, okay, let's start from here and showcase your passion from like probably your college days and why you're here and what kind of impact do you want to have on this world. So I think that's what set me apart. The whole branding. Yeah.
Perfect. Kui, how about you?
Yeah, so I definitely never worked for a company that is known by anyone outside of the biotech cycle. So when I was applying, I think probably my relatively unique experience, because I'm from biotech, as you guys know, not a lot of scientists want to apply for business school. And also in my previous 2 to 3 years career, I joined a company as a relatively early startup, and we went IPO. We also put one of the 2 drug products to the clinical trials. So those are right now looking back, I think, well, that's pretty cool. It's a kind of value inflection points of the company. And this experience actually gives me a lot of advantage right now. At school, when I'm talking to people, that's actually one of the reasons I got a VC role at Boston, focusing on healthcare company. Another thing is, yeah, I don't know. I think I just visited Tug, and then it's close to my home, and then they admitted me. Yeah, that's it.
They're like, yeah, he's already there. I guess we'll have him over. Just kidding.
Yeah, I actually think Aniska, did I pronounce your name right? Oh, yes. So yeah, so I agree with her about the competition among different consultants. Actually, when the admission committee are viewing the applicants, they will group you by your industry, consulting, blah, blah, blah. And they will not say, oh, let's just get everyone from MBB and make them a cohort. No, it definitely doesn't work this way. We have a lot of people who are not in the brand name consulting firms. And there are also a lot of people from MBB who are not admitted, because when they are seeing your big names, they're really interested to see what you are actually doing this, because you might be actually doing very boring projects in the MBB, because that's actually the money generating machine for these big firms. So don't worry too much about that. Know your story is way more important. Well, I think, well, I talk too much, sorry.
Okay. Vishali, what about you? What do you think set you apart?
I think I agree with Anushka and Kwe on this, that yes, it really doesn't matter if you're coming from an overrepresented or underrepresented pool of candidates. It matters that you stay true to your story and true to your strength, and make sure that you are able to convey that in your story, that why you're doing an MBA and why is this, why this particular school's MBA will be your saving grace in order to really achieve what you really are setting out to do. So your whole story has to sound very cohesive, and your impact has to be very, very clear. And that's what I think makes or breaks your chances.
Yeah. And that's why, with MBA and Beyond, and Anushka, Vishali, you said this earlier, like, why working with the consultant to build your brand is such a big deal. Like, it just makes all the difference later on, when you can do that introspection, when you can like do all the content gathering, when you can, work with them to build a brand, because what you're doing is you are, building confidence in yourself and your story. And that's going to show in your essays, in your interviews. You're going to have more confidence in your passions or your pursuits or your initiatives or whatever it is. And ultimately, an MBA admissions committee, what they're looking for is they're saying, is this person going to be hireable when we're done with them? Because that's what's going to make us look good. Your product, they're going to put you out on the market. They want to make sure their product is going to look good. And so sometimes when you're coming from a big name company, it's almost like, that's why you'll see a lot of international candidates in the US having come from big name companies, is sometimes because they might see that as, oh, BCG or something, they kind of already did the work for this, they vetted this candidate. So if they're in BCG, obviously they're hireable. And so sometimes that can, again, influence things. But even if you're from like a startup or something, you just want to show them that, like, yes, hey, I have a plan. I have a plan for after MBA. I have a plan to be hireable or to do my own startup. Like, I have in it, make it make sense. Again, it's just all a pitch. And so, but that's part of building your brand. As a consultant will tell you, hey, that short-term and long-term goal, they don't really make sense. How would you make that make sense? And then that's where you start tying things in or start questioning yourself and going, you're right, maybe my short-term goal doesn't make sense, and then you maybe have whole, a moment for introspection and you end up pivoting on your goals. That happens too. It's a learning process. Someone said, does T15 to T20 have any minimum eligibility criteria for undergrad GPA? And does like a GMAT score, can it compensate? So usually for any school, but for a T20 or something, they're just looking for, can you handle the academic rigor of the program? GMAT does, or a GRE, it does outweigh a GPA, especially if you've had some years of experience since your undergrad. This is at least true for US schools. But they're going to look at the core classes you took, your core coursework in your undergrad. Also, if you are an international candidate, your GPA isn't going to impact their average as much because it doesn't calculate the same way. So sometimes people with lower GPAs that are, again, international, that don't have a 4.0 GPA, sometimes that will, that's actually to your benefit because it's not going to impact their average that they post. But they are going to want to know, can you handle the academic rigor? So sometimes a really high GMAT score, I would say something over a 720, honestly, can help with that. But that's why I would encourage you maybe do a more in-depth profile evaluation. Maybe someone like Kui, who's, you know, at a top tier US school, but the links are in the chat if you want to sign up for a profile evaluation. We only have a few more minutes because I want to be respectful of time. So we'll cut off right at 11:30, but someone said, oh, how can I show, they're working as a startup and as a data analyst. How do they show international exposure since there are no international teams on their company? So does anyone have any insight as to how they could somehow get international exposure if their work isn't providing international opportunities? To me, this is where I usually hear people doing like international, like nonprofit work or advising, volunteering, also travel. I'm not sure if they're already like in Europe or if they're US. I will say US schools, because we're the US, we don't really care as much about international exposure. I'm not going to lie, because we're like, well, everybody wants to come to the US. So why would we care about what's going on in the world otherwise? I'm just kidding, but I'm not kidding. But if you are in Europe, it's definitely a bigger deal. So Anishka, Vishali, do you feel like you were asked about like kind of international exposure and stuff like in the applications or interviews?
Yes, definitely. We were asked about it, and specifically in the interview. But what I gauged from is that what they wanted to basically know that I'm able to function in a multicultural environment. So my little bit of travel experience, because I even do not work with international clients as such, but I've had some travel experience for work. So I made sure that I accounted that into the interview and made sure I collaborated with my story, that how it really helped me and how it really shaped me as a person. And even within India, I think I believe that we are such a multicultural country on its own that even working with people within the country from different parts of the country is something that kind of gives you that multicultural exposure. So I think you have to just convince them that you are able to work in a multicultural setup, and that was about it.
Yeah, and again, great example, Vishali, of, you know, right now we're in a multicultural meeting. We're literally in different parts of the world. We're from different parts of the world. So even if your team is, you know, not necessarily international, there are definitely most likely different cultures being represented. When people ask about international exposure, they're usually asking about how diversity and inclusion and inclusivity. And sometimes that can even be like gender, like, oh, I work mostly with men and I'm a woman. And so I, you know, do meetings, or I'm on a committee that encourages like women to join this company or anything like that. Like, so it's not necessarily just focused on international exposure. It's, again, also speaking to like just diversity or inclusivity in general. Someone asked, it's technically a question for Kui, but it's regarding sustainability. And so, but it's saying, can you elaborate on the sustainability industry? Since we don't have a lot of time, I will just say, like, sustainability in the US is a big thing. I think it is in most place of the world, but you're definitely seeing that Stanford has like a sustainability program that's only like a couple years old. Kellogg is doing something in Ecuador right now to like measure sustainability and social impact. It's all over the place. So it's you're not just going to see that in California. That used to be the case where, you know, Stanford, UCLA, Berkeley, they were the ones focusing on things like that, but you are going to see that more and more now, at least across the top tier schools, a focus on that. Someone asked, can the meeting be summarized? No, definitely this is not a summary type thing, but everybody will get a recording. So we will take care of that. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And before we get to that last question, again, I want to emphasize that if you want to do a profile evaluation with anybody you see on your screen, you can do a free profile evaluation if you've already done one. And especially if you're applying in an upcoming round for like a January 24 intake, we will have something in your email in 2 to 3 days, something that we think you'll find very helpful and beneficial. Okay, so again, one more question. Actually, someone asked about our process, which I think this is the first question we had about our process, so I'll answer that one, which is, could you elaborate on the engagement approach at MBA and Beyond? Does a single consultant work with you across the process of our interactions? Vaishali and Anishka, you both worked with MBA and Beyond. What did that look like for you guys?
The best part about it is that there's no limit or cap on anything. I got together with my consultant for about 2 times a week and 1.5 hours each time. And towards the end, I think that frequency increased. So basically, there's no cap on anything. Yes, you'll be working with a single consultant, but you also have an application buddy. So that is something unique about them as well. And yeah, even for the mock interviews, there's no cap, and there's no cap for the brainstorming sessions, nothing whatsoever.
Vaishali, was that your experience or?
Yes, absolutely. And the best part was that, even with the troubled mind that I had at the moment with so much of confusion, that frequency of interaction with the consultant really helped. That I had the interaction like initially, like as mentioned by Anishka, like 2 times a week. But then slowly, as I was, nearing the applications, the frequency increased. But the best part, which I felt, was that once I was done with the whole content gathering phase, the consultant was matched according to my aspirations and the target schools that I was, aiming at. So that really increased the, like multifold the kind of interaction and how relatable I really found working with that particular consultant. So it was really, game changing for me.
Yes, thank you both. And again, I'm like listening closely because this is part of what I do is I oversee the consultants and the clients. I'm like, I want to make sure that you guys are getting exactly what the process promises, which is, yes, we try to match consultants. It's not a rota system. We match consultants based on, ideally your goals, your industry. And while we may not have somebody from the fashion industry, again, we may have somebody who is, who has gone and gotten their MBA from the school you're interested in, or is in the industry you eventually want to be in, whether that's consulting or finance or ed tech, fintech or something, anything. So we carefully kind of match the consultants. And yes, for the engagement, it really depends on how early you enroll with us. Again, if you're giving yourself time, which as Kui said, like early as possible, right? Now is the answer. But if you're taking your time, you can meet with them, usually it's on maybe like a bi-weekly basis or something, and talk to them in between. If you're really close to deadlines, again, for anybody who's trying to go for like a round 3 January 4 intake deadline, you may be meeting weekly or multiple times a week. It just really, everybody gets a customized timeline. Okay, so that is the time we have for today. So I know there are questions we did not get to. People, I think, got much more energized as we were going in. So the questions kind of piled up. But I think that there was so much insight shared from all of you. And again, for anyone who didn't get their questions answered, like sign up for a profile evaluation, even if you've already done one and maybe you want a second one. I won't tell. So go ahead and like sign up for one. There are only a few spots available for these guys right here. So if you need one, sign up ASAP. But Vaishali, Anishka, Kui, thank you so much for joining and for sharing just your experiences and your insight. It was very valuable.
Thank you, Elena.
You're
you,
welcome.
Thank you, Rana.
Thank you.
It was really fun.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
fun.
Yes, I definitely enjoyed talking to you guys. We'll have to do it more often. Okay, so everyone have a good day or good night.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.